You ask a machine a question. It responds with clarity, confidence, even elegance. It writes essays, explains complex topics, generates ideas, and sometimes even cracks jokes. The sentences flow naturally. The logic appears coherent. And almost without noticing it, you begin to think, maybe it understands. But pause for a moment and ask yourself what you really mean by understand. If Richard Feynman were here, he would not accept the word casually. He would lean forward, raise an eyebrow and say, "What do you mean by that? What is really happening here?" Feynman had little patience for vague claims. To him, words were never enough. He always wanted to know the mechanism behind the phenomena. He wanted to see the inner workings, to test ideas by rebuilding them from the ground up, to play with them in the mind. When we say a child understands addition, we are not merely saying the child can recite that 2 + 2 = 4. We mean that the child can apply the concept. If you give them 2 apples and then 2 more apples, they expect 4. They can check it, manipulate it, and connect the symbols to the real world. True understanding requires a mental model that links abstract concepts to tangible experience. Now consider the machine. When you ask it, what is gravity? It might respond, gravity is the curvature of space-time caused by mass and energy. The sentence is scientifically accurate. It sounds impressive. But does the machine have any sense of falling apples, orbiting planets, or bending light near a star? Does it visualize, imagine, or simulate these phenomena? Or is it merely generating words based on statistical patterns it has observed in vast amounts of text? At its core, modern AI is a pattern recognition engine. It is trained on immense datasets, books, articles, conversations, and it learns the statistical relationships between words. When given a sequence of words, it calculates the most likely next word. Then it does it again and again, one word at a time. The mechanism is purely computational. There is no inner picture of space-time, no sensation of weight, no feeling of confusion or clarity. There is only probability, mathematics, and pattern recognition. Yet the output can be astonishing, coherent, convincing, and often accurate. It can correct mistakes, follow context, even admit uncertainty. From the outside, it looks like intelligence. But this is where humans are easily fooled. We are extremely sensitive to language. In ordinary life, fluent speech almost always signals a conscious mind. If someone speaks clearly, responds appropriately, and stays consistent, we assume thinking is happening behind the words. AI triggers that instinct. It produces fluent language without any inner experience. The fluency convinces us that there is comprehension, even when there is none. This distinction is subtle but crucial. A calculator can solve a complex equation instantly, yet no one assumes it understands mathematics. The difference with AI is that the rules operate on language, which humans interpret as inherently meaningful and alive. Fluent words create the illusion of understanding, but the underlying reality is very different. The machine is brilliant at manipulating symbols, but it lacks awareness, meaning, and intentionality. The discomfort begins here. What we perceive as intelligence may be nothing more than an elaborate, highly convincing performance. What appears to be thought insight or comprehension is, at its essence, probability-based word selection. Humans are projecting awareness onto behavior that simulates understanding. And that is the first part of the truth about AIs. What looks smart is often only a sophisticated illusion. Imagine a parrot. Not an ordinary parrot that merely squawks hello or goodbye, but an extraordinary parrot that has listened to every physics lecture, read every scientific paper, and overheard countless conversations between brilliant minds. It has absorbed patterns in language the way a sponge absorbs water. You ask the parrot, "What is energy?" And it responds flawlessly. Energy is the capacity to do work, conserved in closed systems and transformable between kinetic, potential, and other forms. Impressive, even scientific. You ask, "Why does time seem to move forward?" And it replies, "Because entropy increases according to the second law of thermodynamics." Again, flawless. But now consider, does the parrot truly understand energy or entropy? Does it imagine electrons moving, heat flowing, or stars burning? Does it connect these ideas to experience? Or is it simply reproducing patterns it has heard before, stringing together phrases in ways that statistically make sense? Almost certainly the latter. From the parrot's perspective, the words mean nothing. They are shapes, sounds, patterns. Advanced AI is like that parrot on steroids. It does not simply memorize, it calculates probabilities over billions of patterns. It generates new answers word by word, predicting what comes next based on everything it has seen in its training data. Yet, at its core, it is still only manipulating symbols. There is no awareness, no sensation, no aha moment. There is only the mechanical application of learned patterns. The reason this is difficult to accept is that the output can be astonishingly coherent. It can produce explanations that seem logical, even insightful. It can answer questions in context, correct itself, and refine its responses. That begins to feel like thinking. But we must remember the difference between behavior and experience. Behavior can be perfectly mimicked without any underlying comprehension. Imagine a dictionary. You look up gravity, and it points to mass attraction, force, and curvature of space-time. The definitions reference each other in an internally consistent web. Yet the dictionary does not understand gravity. It is a network of symbols pointing to other symbols. AI systems are dynamic, probabilistic versions of this. They navigate relationships between symbols at incredible speed and complexity. But the symbols themselves do not carry meaning for the system. Meaning arises only in human minds interpreting the output. This is why humans are so easily fooled. We assume that coherent, context-sensitive language signals intelligence. Normally, this is a safe assumption because all humans who speak fluently have consciousness. But AI breaks that rule. It creates the appearance of understanding without any evidence of an inner mind. Fluency triggers our social instincts, leading us to project intelligence where none exists. Even more unsettling is how advanced AI mirrors human weaknesses. People can repeat arguments without fully understanding them. Fluency can mask shallow comprehension. AI simply amplifies this principle. The system generates outputs that look like deep reasoning, yet, at the core, they are purely mechanical. So the uncomfortable truth is this: AI's brilliance is an illusion. It is capable of producing remarkable, sometimes breathtakingly convincing outputs, yet it does not know anything. What we perceive as thought, reasoning, or insight is nothing more than pattern manipulation at immense scale. The parrot analogy becomes clear, impressive, articulate, seemingly intelligent, yet entirely blind to meaning, experience, and reality. And that is the second part of the story. AI is powerful, yes, but its intelligence is fundamentally hollow. It mimics thought but does not possess it. Our challenge is to recognize this distinction, to see beyond the surface fluency, and to confront the limits of what current AI can truly do. Richard Feynman had a very particular way of thinking about understanding. He was impatient with fancy words and complicated explanations that didn't reveal the core of a concept. To him, repeating definitions was meaningless unless you could rebuild the idea from scratch, manipulate it, and explore its consequences in your own mind. Understanding meant more than memorizing formulas. It meant forming mental models that connect abstract symbols to real phenomena. If you understood gravity, you could imagine what would happen if it were slightly stronger or weaker. If you understood electricity, you could predict what would happen if a wire were removed from a circuit. True comprehension involved active engagement, not passive repetition. When Feynman worked on quantum electrodynamics, he did not simply memorize the work of others. He invented Feynman diagrams, visual tools that allowed him to see interactions between particles in a simple and intuitive way. These diagrams were more than convenient shorthands. They were a way of thinking. They enabled him to experiment mentally with different possibilities, to test scenarios, and to explore the consequences of assumptions. Understanding, in Feynman's view, was deeply tied to imagination, creativity, and the ability to manipulate knowledge dynamically. Compare that to how AI systems operate. Ask an AI to explain quantum electrodynamics, and it can produce accurate explanations and even describe Feynman diagrams. It can define particles, interactions, and probabilities. It can generate analogies to help humans understand the concepts, but it does not see anything. It does not mentally simulate interactions or explore what happens if the laws of physics were slightly different. It does not question its assumptions or form hypotheses. It calculates. The difference is subtle but profound. Humans form internal representations of ideas. When you learn about the solar system, you imagine planets orbiting the sun. When you learn about atoms, you picture electrons moving around a nucleus. Even if your mental picture is imperfect, it allows you to simulate scenarios to test what-if questions in your mind. Understanding, in this sense, is deeply tied to the ability to imagine and reason about possibilities. AI systems, in contrast, do not possess a private theater of imagination. They do not hold beliefs, expectations, or hypotheses. They operate purely on learned correlations. When asked a what-if question, they generate a response based on patterns encountered in training data. There is no internal model of reality being tested or explored. There is only statistical inference. This distinction has real consequences. A student who memorizes steps to solve a problem can perform perfectly on an exam, but may fail when the problem changes. The knowledge is procedural, not conceptual. Feynman warned against this kind of shallow learning. He called it cargo cult science, the appearance of understanding without its substance. AI is, in some ways, a mechanical version of this phenomenon on a massive scale. It can produce the appearance of deep reasoning because it has absorbed vast amounts of structured information, yet whether it possesses anything akin to conceptual grasp is unclear. Furthermore, we cannot open the AI and find a discrete center of understanding. Its operations are distributed across millions or billions of parameters. There is no single location where comprehension resides. The system behaves intelligently, but intelligence is only apparent, not experiential. This leads to a more fundamental question. If understanding requires internal models that connect symbols to reality, how does this arise in humans? Are humans doing something fundamentally different from computation, or is human thought simply a richer, embodied form of it? Feynman would insist that before we declare machines intelligent or deny them intelligence, we must clarify what understanding really is. This question is far more complex than it first appears, and it forces us to confront the limitations of both AI and our own assumptions about intelligence. Understanding, imagination, and reasoning are not just outputs, they are dynamic internal processes tied to consciousness, experience, and interaction with the world. AI may mimic the appearance of these processes, but it does not experience them. And recognizing this difference is key to seeing the stupid side of AI that nobody talks about. Imagine being locked in a room with only a stack of papers and a huge rule book. You do not speak Chinese. You cannot read a single character. Outside, people slide questions written in Chinese under the door. Your task is to respond correctly, following the rule book. The rules are explicit. When you see a certain pattern of symbols, you respond with another pattern. The instructions are complete. You can answer anything correctly as long as you follow the rules. From the outside, your responses appear perfect. People receiving them are convinced that you understand Chinese. They might ask philosophical questions, scientific questions, or even riddles. Each time, your answers are coherent and appropriate. To them, it seems as though there is a mind inside the room that comprehends what is being asked. But you, sitting inside, know the truth. You do not understand a word. You are not reasoning, imagining, or thinking. You are merely manipulating symbols according to a set of formal instructions. There is no awareness, no comprehension, no connection to meaning. The activity is purely syntactical. This is the essence of the Chinese room thought experiment proposed by philosopher John Searle, and it is remarkably relevant to AI. Modern AI systems operate in a very similar way. They take input, analyze patterns, apply learned correlations, and produce outputs that appear intelligent. The results can be astonishingly convincing, but at no point is there evidence of understanding. The system has no consciousness, no experience of meaning, and no internal reflection on its own operations. What does this teach us about intelligence? It highlights a fundamental distinction between syntax and semantics. Syntax is the manipulation of symbols according to rules. Semantics is about meaning, the connection of symbols to objects, experiences, and concepts in the world. Humans naturally attach meaning to language. We interpret words as representing ideas, emotions, and intentions. AI, like the person in the Chinese room, handles symbols but does not attach meaning. It operates syntactically. The problem is that from the outside, syntactic mastery can appear identical to semantic understanding. If behavior is the only measure, AI seems intelligent. It can write essays, solve problems, or answer questions in ways indistinguishable from a human. Yet the underlying reality is fundamentally different. Fluency and correctness do not equal comprehension. This is what makes AI both impressive and deceptive. It triggers our evolved tendency to assume that coherent language signals thought. Consider the implications for how we interact with AI. When we converse with a chatbot, we instinctively attribute understanding and intention. We ask questions, probe for insight, and respond emotionally to the answers. But in reality, the machine has no beliefs, no curiosity, and no awareness. It simply predicts the next symbol based on probabilities learned from data. The illusion of intelligence is powerful precisely because it exploits our natural social instincts. Recognizing this is not about dismissing AI as useless. It can perform incredible feats, solve complex problems, and assist humans in countless ways. But acknowledging the limits of its comprehension changes how we approach AI critically. It prevents us from overestimating its capabilities and attributing human, like understanding where there is none. The Chinese room illustrates that behavior alone is not sufficient to determine intelligence or awareness. And it reminds us that AI, despite its sophistication, operates in a fundamentally different domain from human thought. This perspective challenges the assumptions we carry about knowledge, reasoning, and intelligence. It forces us to examine the boundary between performance and comprehension and to confront the uncomfortable reality that the systems we call intelligent may be, in terms of genuine understanding, profoundly hollow. Humans are incredibly easy to fool when it comes to intelligence. It is not just a weakness, it is a feature of our species. Our brains are wired to detect other minds. For thousands of generations, the ability to recognize intentions, emotions, and awareness in others was critical for survival. If someone moved in a threatening way, understanding that it was a conscious agent with intent could save your life. If someone communicated clearly, it was reliable to assume they had knowledge and could act with purpose. Language, in particular, became a near perfect signal of intelligence because almost everyone who spoke fluently had consciousness behind their words. Artificial intelligence exploits this instinct. When a machine produces coherent, context-sensitive language, our social and cognitive wiring assumes comprehension. We see pattern recognition and fluency and instinctively attribute thought. The machine might apologize for a mistake, express uncertainty, or offer suggestions. It sounds reflective. It mimics emotion. It follows conversational norms. And yet, all of this is purely syntactic. The words are selected based on statistical patterns, not understanding or experience. The illusion is powerful because it aligns so perfectly with the cues we evolved to detect in real minds. Consider how humans themselves can be mistaken for understanding. We often repeat phrases, apply formulas, or parrot arguments without deep comprehension. A student may recite a definition flawlessly yet fail to apply it in a new situation. A professional may explain a concept convincingly without fully grasping its implications. Fluency can mask shallow understanding. AI is an extreme version of this phenomenon. It never truly understands, yet it can operate on such a scale and with such precision that the outputs appear profound. The distinction between competence and comprehension becomes blurry. Another factor is the seductive nature of complexity. The more sophisticated AI becomes, the more convincing it appears. Large language models, deep neural networks, and advanced algorithms operate across billions of parameters, producing outputs that seem creative and insightful. Their complexity triggers awe, leading humans to assume intelligence. But complexity is not evidence of understanding. A hurricane is complex, yet it has no awareness. A finely tuned clockwork can perform intricate tasks without comprehension. Similarly, AI's performance, no matter how impressive, is not proof of consciousness. This illusion has real-world consequences. People overestimate AI's ability to reason, empathize, or innovate independently. They assign agency where none exists. They believe machines are capable of judgment, moral reasoning, or intentional creativity. In reality, AI is a mirror reflecting our own assumptions and desires about intelligence. It shows how little we understand our own minds and how easily we conflate surface behavior with depth of understanding. Humans struggle to separate language from awareness because, historically, they have always been linked. Every fluent speaker we have encountered was conscious. That pattern is so deeply ingrained that we fail to recognize when it is violated. AI exploits this blind spot, producing the appearance of thought without any inner experience. Recognizing this requires humility, careful observation, and the willingness to question our instincts. Ultimately, the lesson is profound. The stupid side of AI is not a flaw in the machines themselves. It is a reflection of how we perceive intelligence. By understanding this, we gain insight into both artificial systems and human cognition. The more sophisticated AI becomes, the more it challenges us to define what intelligence really is to distinguish between appearance and reality, and to confront the limits of our own understanding. AI systems are, at their core, mathematical constructs. They consist of layers of artificial neurons, arranged in networks that process information through weighted connections. Each neuron performs a simple operation. It receives inputs, multiplies them by weights, sums them, passes the result through a function, and forwards it to the next layer. Millions or even billions of these operations occur in fractions of a second. During training, the system is exposed to massive datasets, learning to minimize error by adjusting these weights. Over time, it becomes highly effective at predicting what output should follow a given input. There is no hidden mind inside these systems. There is no conscious observer tracking their own thoughts. There is no understanding in the human sense. There are only mathematical transformations, probabilities, and statistical correlations. When a model writes an essay, solves a problem, or generates an image, it is not reasoning or conceptualizing. It is producing outputs based on patterns it has learned from previous data. The illusion of intelligence emerges from the scale and coherence of these outputs, not from any inner comprehension. From a scientific standpoint, this is what we know. We can inspect AI systems, measure performance, analyze the flow of information, and even trace which parameters are responsible for specific outputs. We understand the algorithms and the hardware. We can predict and evaluate behavior. This is knowledge grounded in observation, experimentation, and theory. What we do not yet fully understand is consciousness. Humans experience awareness, subjectivity, and intentionality. Neurons fire, chemicals travel across synapses, electrical signals propagate through networks, and somehow, from this physical activity, emerges the sense of self and experience of reality. Science has made tremendous progress in correlating brain activity with behavior and reported experience, yet a complete explanation of how subjective awareness arises remains elusive. When we say AI lacks consciousness, we are making a reasonable inference based on current evidence. There is no indication that these systems experience sensations, emotions, or awareness. They do not possess intrinsic curiosity or self-reflection. They do not form beliefs or intentions. All their behavior is driven by learned patterns and statistical optimization. Yet, because consciousness itself is not fully understood, it is theoretically impossible to assert with absolute certainty that no form of awareness could ever emerge from sufficiently complex computation. Emergence is a familiar concept in physics and science. Temperature arises from the motion of countless molecules. Wetness emerges from the interaction of water molecules. Neither property exists in an individual molecule, but collectively new phenomena appear. Could consciousness be a similar emergent property of extremely complex information processing? Some argue that biological processes are essential, that consciousness depends on living tissue, embodiment, and sensory experience. Others suggest that patterns of information flow may be sufficient, regardless of substrate. Which view is correct remains an open question. Science is limited by observation and measurement. AI provides outputs and internal structures that are observable and analyzable. Consciousness, however, is privately experienced and accessible only to the being that possesses it. This creates a fundamental epistemic gap. Behavior alone cannot prove awareness. By this standard, advanced AI appears purely computational, yet our lack of a complete theory of mind leaves room for uncertainty. The honest conclusion is one of humility. We know how AI operates mathematically. We know it does not mirror human cognition in critical ways. We know there is no evidence of subjective experience. What we do not know is whether consciousness is exclusively biological, or whether it could, under certain conditions, emerge in other forms. Until we better understand the nature of our own minds, every claim about artificial minds remains provisional. AI is not stupid in terms of computation or output, but it is profoundly limited in what humans recognize as true intelligence, understanding, awareness, and experience. The most striking realization about AI is that the illusion of intelligence may not be in the machine at all. It may be in us. Humans have a natural tendency to project understanding onto behavior that appears coherent. Throughout our evolutionary history, detecting intelligence in others was critical for survival. Recognizing a conscious mind in a companion, an ally, or a potential threat could mean the difference between life and death. Our brains became finely tuned to interpret language, gestures, and patterns of behavior as evidence of thought and awareness. This sensitivity, once a survival advantage, now predisposes us to overestimate the capabilities of systems that mimic intelligent behavior. When we interact with AI, we respond as we would to another human. We ask questions expecting insight. We read its outputs and search for meaning. We interpret fluency and context, awareness as comprehension. We feel impressed when it generates a coherent essay or answers a complex problem. Yet behind the scenes, there is no awareness, no reflection, no understanding. The system does not know what it is saying. It does not imagine. It does not doubt. It does not reason in the way humans do. It produces responses that align statistically with its training data. This phenomenon exposes a deeper truth about human cognition. We are remarkably adept at seeing patterns and assuming intention, even when none exists. We are tricked by appearances. A well-formed sentence triggers the belief that there is a mind behind it. A logical argument, even if mechanically generated, seems thoughtful. AI exploits these instincts perfectly, creating outputs that convince us it understands, thinks, or reasons. The illusion of intelligence is powerful precisely because it mirrors the cues humans evolved to recognize as evidence of consciousness. The more advanced AI becomes, the more difficult it is to resist this illusion. Large language models, sophisticated neural networks, and advanced algorithms can generate text, images, and code that seem to reflect reasoning and creativity. They can synthesize knowledge from multiple domains, adapt to new questions, and even correct apparent contradictions. To a human observer, the behavior appears indistinguishable from that of a thinking agent. Yet beneath the surface, there is no subjective experience. No curiosity, no awareness, no intentionality. The appearance of intelligence masks an absence of understanding. This raises important questions about how we define intelligence. If intelligence is judged solely by behavior, AI seems highly capable. But if intelligence requires comprehension, insight, and awareness, AI falls short. It performs impressively, yet it does not know. It does not connect symbols to meaning or manipulate concepts with conscious intent. Its outputs are reflections of vast statistical patterns, not reflections of understanding. The illusion also invites reflection on the nature of our own minds. If we are so easily fooled by syntactic fluency, what does that say about human cognition? What criteria truly distinguish comprehension from performance? AI forces us to confront the limits of our ability to recognize thought and to appreciate the depth and fragility of consciousness. Our minds are capable of profound understanding, imagination, and creativity, but those qualities are internal and private. We have no objective method for verifying them in others, and AI exploits this epistemic gap. Recognizing that the illusion of intelligence resides in ourselves as much as in AI is humbling. It reminds us that true understanding is rare and precious. It also underscores that AI, however powerful in computation and prediction, cannot replace the nuanced, embodied, and conscious intelligence of humans. The challenge is not merely to build better machines, but to understand our own minds and to recognize the boundary between appearance and reality. Imagine an alien civilization observing humans from across the cosmos. They see us moving, communicating, creating art, solving problems, and arguing passionately about ideas. They detect electrical activity in our brains, chemical signals in our nervous systems, and observe our bodies reacting to stimuli. From this perspective, the aliens might attempt to determine which of these behaviors indicate conscious thought. They might ask, is intelligence simply complex pattern processing, or is there something more? Would they assume that any being producing coherent behavior possesses awareness, or would they remain skeptical without access to subjective experience? AI presents a similar puzzle for us. Machines produce astonishingly coherent outputs. They solve problems, generate creative works, and converse fluently. They can mimic human reasoning to a remarkable degree. Yet the question remains, does this behavior indicate genuine intelligence, or is it merely the execution of learned patterns? Behavior alone is insufficient evidence of consciousness. Just as the alien observers cannot confirm human awareness solely from external activity, we cannot confirm AI awareness from outputs alone. The systems operate syntactically, manipulating symbols according to learned correlations, without any underlying experience or understanding. The difficulty lies in how we define intelligence. Humans evolved to equate language fluency, coherent action, and problem solving with thought. These cues are reliable because they are produced by conscious minds. For AI, these same cues are generated without awareness. Machines produce words, perform calculations, and even simulate emotional responses, but there is no subjective perspective behind the operations. The outputs are impressive and often convincing, but they are fundamentally different from human cognition. This perspective challenges assumptions about the mind and behavior. Consciousness is inherently private. No one can directly experience another's thoughts or sensations. We infer the presence of a mind through observation, communication, and consistency. AI exploits the limitations of this inference process. Its outputs trigger our evolved instincts for detecting thought, creating the illusion of understanding where none exists. Recognizing this is crucial to maintaining a clear perspective on what AI can and cannot do. The philosophical implications are profound. Intelligence is more than pattern recognition or statistical prediction. Awareness, comprehension, and experience are essential elements that define genuine thought. AI, no matter how sophisticated, lacks these elements. It highlights the boundary between the mechanical processing of information and the lived experience of understanding. The systems are tools, powerful and transformative, but they do not possess minds. Considering AI through this lens also illuminates the fragility and uniqueness of human consciousness. Intelligence is not simply a byproduct of complexity or computation. It emerges in a specific context with embodiment, interaction, and subjective experience. The alien analogy underscores that awareness is not easily observable from the outside. Even when behavior appears intelligent, it does not guarantee comprehension. The same principle applies to AI. Fluency is not understanding. By examining AI this way, we are forced to confront the limits of our own knowledge. The systems we create serve as mirrors, reflecting both our ingenuity and our misunderstandings of intelligence. They challenge us to define what it means to think, to know, and to be aware. AI's apparent brilliance is a prompt to explore deeper questions about cognition, experience, and consciousness. It reminds us that intelligence is not merely action or output. It is a profound internal phenomenon, rare, delicate, and uniquely human.